Ladies and gents, welcome back to another video. I hope you're doing well today. We've got a little package here, and inside of it is an iPod Touch. This is going to be an iPod Touch 4th generation. I believe it's a 32 gigabyte black model. It's either running iOS 4 or 5, I remember from the listing pictures. Not sure which one it is. You guys will probably know based on the thumbnail. Let's get it opened up, see what kind of condition it's in, and find out what version of iOS we have. Hopefully iOS 4, but iOS 5 will be pretty cool anyway. Let's begin. Okay, here is our iPod, and if we look at the back here, this is very clean. Normally these have a bunch of scratches. Let's see if I have one here to show you guys. Yeah, here's one that has a sticker on it. Let me take that off. Here is how they typically look after years of wear, and of course this is the one we just unboxed there on the left. Much cleaner. This device is in really good condition. Flipping around to the front, we have our display, which does look like it's a little dusty, but no cracks, and I'm really not seeing any scratches either. Very nice. The corners look very good. Charging port looks nice. Speaker grill is pretty clean. Overall, this is looking like a very well cared for iPod. Let's see if this thing has any power, and it does. Slide to unlock. Here we are at the home screen. The question is this iOS 4 or 5? We've got the YouTube icon, FaceTime. I am not sure. Let's head into settings and find out. There we go. iOS 4, we've got the rectangular toggle switches there. So that's 4 for sure. Let's see which one. 4.3.5. That is, I believe, the last version of iOS 4, at least for the iPod Touch. So that's pretty cool. I'm going to go ahead and adjust some of these settings. I think our language or our region is different somehow. Yeah, region format is set in Russian. I would like English, please. Somewhere. I didn't even know you could change that. There we go. Calendar. I think that's correct. All right, so I didn't even look if there was anything on this iPod. I don't think there was. Yeah, no music, no songs, no videos, no photos. But there you have it. iPod Touch 4th gen running iOS 4.3.5. Pretty hard to find, but honestly, in terms of the difficulty of finding iOS devices on their original versions of iOS, this is actually one of the easiest. And this is a very nice iPod. It's pretty cold, as you can see there. My fingerprints are just condensing. So this is a 32 gigabyte model. The iPod Touch 4th gen shipped in 8, 16, 32, and 64. The 16 gigabyte version launched in 2012 alongside the iPod Touch 5th gen. That was not sold for very long and is actually the only iPod and iOS device that never got a single iOS update. So that's kind of a story for another day if I ever get one of those 16 gigabyte models. But checking out some of these iOS 4 wallpapers, they are all very familiar. We have seen these many, many times, and they look very nice. The iPod Touch 4th gen revolutionized the game for Apple. This was a big upgrade over the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd gen iPod Touches. The 4th gen brought so many features to the iPod Touch lineup, the first of which is the same Retina display found on the iPhone 4. Although I believe technically it's not the exact same. I think there are differences in the brightness as well as viewing angles are not as good on the iPod Touch, but this looks pretty nice. It's of course a Retina display, 3.5 inches, so very small by today's standards, but back in 2010 when this iPod launched, that was the norm. Opening up the camera, you can see we have a 0.7 megapixel lens, which is good for not much. This thing can take photos and videos, the first iPod Touch to be able to do that. And that was a huge selling point for this device, was the ability to capture pictures and videos and then be able to upload them and send them instantly without having to have a digital camera. I know back when I was young, a lot of people had an iPod, a cell phone, and a digital camera because you needed all three of those things if you weren't fortunate enough to be able to have one of the early iPhones. And at the time, you had to be pretty wealthy for your family to buy you an iPhone back when the 2G, 3G, and 3GS came out. Pretty difficult to get one of those. But the 4th gen was $229 for 8 gigabytes when it launched, $299 for 32, which is what we have here, and then $399 for 64. This is also the first iPod to feature Apple's custom silicon. So this has the A4 processor. It's a single core clocked at 800 megahertz. Not very powerful, but a slight improvement over the Samsung processor found in the 3rd gen iPod Touch. Obviously, the biggest selling points for this iPod and the things that you notice right away when you pick it up is the Retina display and the ability to take photos and videos. And of course the design, it feels very nice to hold. It was a departure from the 2nd and 3rd gen iPods, which had a very rounded back. This is just rounded on the edges and then flat on the back, so you can lay it down and it sits there nicely. It's not going to wobble and tip around. This was very similar to the design found in the 1st gen iPod Touch, which I do have here. Flat on the back, but rounded on the edges. Apple moved the lock switch, or the power button, whatever you want to call it, to the right side of the device. On the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd gen, it was over here on the left, and I believe that was to make room for the antennas here. As you'll notice, the 4th gen does not have one of these little black plastic pieces. The antennas are incorporated towards the front of the device and pass through the glass instead of the little plastic corner. The iPod Touch 4th gen was also the first to be introduced in a white color, following suit with the iPhone 4, which was actually launched in black first, and the white would not become available until several months after that initial release. The 4th gen iPod Touch does not have Siri, but neither did the iPhone 4. This iPod shipped with iOS 4, as we all know, and it would get updates to iOS 5, and iOS 6 would be its final resting place. There is an unofficial way to install iOS 7, but apparently it does not work very well and is super glitchy and slow, and things like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth don't work, so not very usable. But this device feels very smooth. It's quite snappy, and running iOS 4 is a breeze for this iPod. We already talked about the camera, but some other things we have not mentioned is the Game Center app, which was introduced in iOS 4, as well as multitasking was introduced in iOS 4 and available on the 4th gen and the 3rd gen iPod Touch, thanks to their 256 megabytes of RAM. FaceTime was also added, of course, to the iPod Touch to make use of those cameras. In iOS 5, which this iPod Touch got updated to a year later, we would get iCloud, including iMessage, and a lot of new features. So for a bunch of people who had the 1st and 2nd gen iPod Touches, this was a very nice upgrade, especially in performance. 3rd gen was kind of somewhere in between because you did get the iCloud features as well as iOS 5 and iMessage, but the 1st and 2nd gens did not get that. So overall, this is a super clean device. The iPod Touch 4th gen is beautiful, and this one is in very good condition. I love the accents here, the buttons on the side. That's actually something the 1st gen iPod Touch does not have. There are no volume buttons. All you have is a power button and a home button. That's it. If you want to change the volume, you have to do it on the device, which was pretty annoying. If you had it in your pocket, you had to pull it out, unlock it, do all this just to change the volume. But there you have it. Of course, this was the first iPod to have a little speaker grill. 1st gen did not have a speaker at all. Well, actually, that's wrong. It does have a speaker, but it's not capable of playing music or sounds. It just has keyboard clicks and lock noises. So this is the first time Apple added a dedicated speaker grill to the iPod, as the 2nd and 3rd gen just had a speaker underneath the display. All right, I think that's going to wrap up this video. Hope you enjoyed a look here at an iPod Touch 4th gen running iOS 4.3.5 here in 2024. These are getting harder and harder to find, but if you're looking for one of these devices, stay at it and eventually they will pop up. I use eBay to find most of my devices, and if you look long enough, you'll find what you are searching for. All right, hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I look forward to seeing you in another one of my videos.